Future pop-up webinar on writing op-eds. And before I hand you over to our presenters for the day, Owen Gaffney and Bondre, I just wanted to check if you can all hear and see us all right. It would be fantastic if someone could write in the chat box just to say hello. Thanks for joining us. This session is being recorded for YouTube, and the slides and the video will be available online afterwards. If you have any questions at any point during the presentations, please feel free to write them in the chat box and we can take them straight away, and we'll also have time for a bit more discussion towards the end of the webinar. So I can't see if anyone's joined just yet. I think we have about 20 people in the room. I hope you can all see and hear us. Yes, great. So I think I'll hand over to Owen now. A few people have said hello.
Okay, thanks very much, Lizzie. Yeah, welcome everybody to this Future Earth pop-up webinar on op-eds and commentaries and editorials, that kind of thing. So I'm Owen Gaffney. I'm Head of Communications at Future Earth and Head of International Media at the Stockholm Resilience Centre. Right now I'm sitting at the Royal Academy of Sciences in Stockholm, and I'm an engineer by training, astronautics, but I've been working in the media for 20 years and maybe working in Earth system science and communications for the last 12 years or so. And we have Nina Bondre here. Nina, do you want to say a couple of words?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Owen. My name is Ninad Bondre. I work as a science editor and advisor for the International Geosphere Biosphere Program, also located at the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. So I'm right now sitting one floor below Owen's. And my background is in geology, but I have subsequently worked largely in editing and publishing. So I was an editor for the journal Nature Geoscience, and then I've subsequently moved on to the climate and policy area with IGBP.
Okay, thanks. And we're going to kind of jointly do this this commentary. We had a bit of an issue with sound just before we went live on air, and I thought that our solution was possibly for me just to run downstairs and run this together with Ninad. But we got it sorted out just in time. Yeah, so we'll just we'll have this fairly relaxed. I mean, put questions in the chat box, and we'll try to answer them. And we'll keep it fairly loose. I might get through the full presentation. I might not if we have a lot of dialogue and discussion on particular areas. We'll just see how it goes. But we'll talk for a bit, and then we'll just we'll open it up as questions start coming in. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. So I'll just share my screen now. We can't seem to get it working on full screen. So what we'll talk about in this, about 5 things. You know, what is an op-ed? Why write one? Where can you get it published? And then some very sort of practicals on how do you structure an op-ed, what it should contain, what should the opening paragraph be like, and how do you pitch it? Where do you send it? And what works as a good strong pitch? So what is an op-ed? Well, all media, well, for a start, op-ed means it comes from the term opposite editorial. So all media have an editorial where the newspaper editor gives their opinion on a particular issue of the day, and then usually on the page opposite, traditionally, you would have opinions on issues of the day from other thought leaders, experts, usually politicians or business people or journalists or celebrities, increasingly, and now increasingly the scientific community. They're often, I mean, very practically. So I have Nature in front of me. Where this is really about mainstream media, but all media work in the same way. So if, let's see, I'll just come off this for a second. Yeah, so I have Nature in front of me. It starts off with the editorial this week in there, and the editor gives their opinion on 3 issues relating to Volkswagen, let's see, gene sequencing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So there they are. Then the next page is the world view. So this is the key op-ed in Nature, and this is single author, their opinion on a particular issue. Science must prepare for impact. That's often the way, and then you get into more traditional news, not opinion, for a few pages. Then you get into commentaries. Let's see. About 6 pages of news, Bitcoin, stuff like that. Then you get into commentaries. These are more like op-eds as well, but for the scientific audience, sort of strong opinions on a particular issue, usually related to policy in some shape or form. And Nina, have you any thoughts?
Yeah, no, not really. As Owen said, many of the major journals like Nature and Science, in some ways, their front halves operate in a similar fashion as the mainstream news media. So they put a lot of emphasis on opinion pieces, and in that sense, they have editorials, which is sort of the publishers or the editors' view on affairs, and then that will be followed by comments and worldview pieces and things like that, which have to do with other people's views and opinions.
So you should see my screen now again. So they're often the most read section of newspapers. They usually about 800 words long. We'll get into some more detail on that. They usually relate to a big event in the world, environmental catastrophe, financial crisis, climate summit, World Water Week, that sort of thing. And they usually finish with some sort of demand or ask. Usually, critical of some policy or another. Somebody's not doing something right, and you've got an idea to fix it, and they normally need that sort of strong ask. So from the scientific community's point of view, then we have a specific role in society as providing sort of independent evidence on issues. So oftentimes then we can point out how a particular government policy that is maybe meant to be based on scientific evidence or whatever may be likely to fail because they haven't considered certain things. They need to do something differently, and we could have an opinion on that, based on the research. I mean, this is a key thing. This is the part of the value of science in society. So it has to be sort of evidence-based, whereas other opinions in newspapers don't have to be evidence-based at all. Often they're not. They're pure opinion, and they don't have to adhere to the same sort of values, I guess, as the research community. And this actually sometimes makes it more difficult for scientific op-eds or op-eds from the scientific community to be as forceful and strong, perhaps, as others. But in other cases, that's not the case. Nina, you any thoughts on that?
No, as you said, because of this emphasis on evidence and nuance, which scientists are familiar with and comfortable with, exactly as you said, it can sometimes be difficult to voice an opinion clearly and forcefully. And I think it comes with some practice, and the more you read, the more you're comfortable with seeking that balance between sticking to the facts, but also being sort of forceful with your opinions.
Yeah, precisely. That's a good point on the more you read, because if you don't read the op-ed columns and you want to get an op-ed in, it's very, very unlikely to get in. They follow a fairly strict formula. They want that repeated. There's usually very little flexibility, and if you're not following that style in terms of impact and in terms of sort of robust opinions, for example, then you're not going to get in. And the same applies to Nature and Science and those journals that if you don't, they have a specific style that you need to go for. Of course, with Nature and Science, they're quite conservative journals, but still they need a very fresh perspective and a novel take on a subject to make the grade, to make the cut into it. So, I mean, here's the World Economic Forum. They have a blog called Agenda, and they do only op-eds in there. And the president of the World Bank and I guess leaders in the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, etc., some world leaders, business leaders, scientists, and others, write for here because it's a good outlet. I mean, it's got quite a broad readership, and it does what it says. I mean, the World Economic Forum does set agendas in places. So we worked with the World Economic Forum on a series of op-eds for the Sustainable Development Goals. And with some people from the scientific community, some researchers, and other thought leaders, commissioned some articles. So here's a few of them. Why education should top the development agenda. 3 steps to a more sustainable economy. Removing carbon from the global economy. So these kinds of things, and these were shared quite widely. You get several thousand shares from doing this. So they spread quite widely on social media, so they make quite a good impact in that respect. Here's something else. Huffington Post is another outlet. So Johan Rockström from the Stockholm Resilience Centre writes quite a bit for there. Arctic tipping points can ripple. And again, this was this came out of Johan was speaking at the Arctic Climate Resilience Summit in Anchorage with Barack Obama and John Kerry and co were there, so it was already making a bit of a media impact. So we worked on an op-ed for the Huffington Post, specifically talking about resilience in the Arctic, which did well. So why write an op-ed? So here's one from someone from our community, the Global Land Project, Earl Ellis. Overpopulation is not the problem. I guess there's many reasons to write an op-ed, and there's many reasons why not to. I mean, op-eds are not about educating the public in some way, not about some sort of pedagogic function. They're really about influencing opinion and thought leadership. I had a few other points here. Contextualizing current events, responding to misrepresentation, but really it is about influencing opinion in some shape or form, and that's sort of broader thought leadership. Here Earl is talking about why many environmental scientists talk about coming catastrophes and crises, etc. He says this is not very well grounded, and that talk about overpopulation. He says his big focus here, obviously, is not really the issue, and that technology and other things will sort it out. So there's a very strong view in there, and that got quite a lot of reaction from the scientific community. Not everybody agreed with that approach, but he really wanted to get that out. And more generally, I think Earl Ellis is part of the Breakthrough Institute in the US, who are very, very good at thought leadership and opinion forming, and have quite a lot of success in getting op-eds in some of the mainstream media. Here's a couple more from Ted Nordhaus and Michael Schellenberger, responding to George Monbiot in The Guardian with an op-ed, again articulating the same kind of things, that technology, the Anthropocene is a great opportunity for humanity. Technology will help ensure that we behave sustainably. They got launched this eco-modernist manifesto and promoting that heavily. So they're using the media very, very effectively, I think, getting that thought leadership out. Ninad, I know you have some thoughts on their effectiveness.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Breakthrough Institute and its fellows are a classic example of they have strong opinions and views on things. They are often backed by evidence, and evidence always goes through different lenses. So, they have been very effective in getting their messages across, be it blogs like Andy Revkin's or op-eds in the New York Times or this recent one in The Guardian. And I think that in part reflects an American history, let's say, or tradition of think tanks, which you don't really have the same sorts of think tanks elsewhere in the world. And the specific function of these think tanks is to influence opinion either of the public or policymakers. And so they've cultivated that tradition, and they tend to be quite good at it. and others in Europe and elsewhere in Asia. I think we are just picking up, but there's big potential in that.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. So, and the media side of things. So, it's internationally, this is what we'd describe as the kind of top-tier media for impact. New York Times, Washington Post, Guardian, Financial Times. Project Syndicate. Maybe many of you won't know that. Science, Nature, New Scientist, Scientific American, sort of key science ones. But I'll speak about Project Syndicate in a bit. But Ninad, you have some thoughts on New York Times, the kind of stuff New York Times is looking for.
Yeah, I was wondering if I should try to share my screen so I could show the op-ed on there. Maybe we can do an experiment, and if it doesn't work, I'll just read from it. But I'm going to quickly try and share my screen here, and you can tell me if it works. Can you see this, Owen?
I can see it as a large screen.
Okay, excellent. And you can see the op-ed and new page.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hope others can see this too. And this is an op-ed essentially, or a column written by the New York Times op-ed editor Trish Hall. And so if you want to submit an op-ed to the New York Times, if you follow the link, you'll come across this piece by the editor there. And I think it's a nice, short but succinct piece that tells you what the New York Times is looking for in terms of op-eds. And they are very open here. They say, we need you. We need a diversity of voices and opinions about a range of topics. And they claim that anything can be an op-ed. That they are not only interested in policy or politics or government, but in anything if it's opinionated, and if they believe their readers will find reading. So we can perhaps include this link or send it via emails to you.
Yeah, I've just included the link in the chat box, in fact.
Excellent, great. And so when you have a chance, have a look at this, and it gives you an insight into sort of the minds of the editors that are looking at the content you submit. And there's some really good instructions in here, or thoughts about how to structure op-eds, what sorts of topics work and not. And the New York Times is really one of the top outlets. If you publish something there, chances are it'll have wider readership than many other outlets that are out there. Partly also because the New York Times aims to inform opinion and shape opinion on global topics in a way that many other newspapers and outlets don't. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, and they certainly cover a lot of material in our community, the Future Earth community, global sustainability research ideas like the Anthropocene, etc. They're very keen to include. So I got my screen up again. So Project Syndicate, let's see. Yeah, so this is an interesting.
I can't see your screen, so perhaps you want to try sharing it again.
Yeah, okay. How does that work?
Okay, yeah, we're back on.
Yeah, so Project Syndicate, they basically, not all media in the world can attract the kind of names that the New York Times or the Financial Times or Guardian can in this kind of thought leadership opinion space. A lot of countries just aren't able to get the international names, or a lot of media outlets in countries. But Project Syndicate provides a service for that. It works like Reuters, really, for op-eds. That thought leaders like Ban Ki-moon or Jeff Sachs, for example, have regular columns in Project Syndicate, and then newspapers around the world syndicate, or these columns are syndicated to newspapers around the world. So many US media outside of the Washington Post, New York Times sphere will take Project Syndicate content because I don't know, the Denver Post or whatever is not likely to attract a specific op-ed from Barack Obama, for example. So they do stuff, and this gets everywhere. Stuff we've done for them ends up in Japan, gets syndicated very widely in Asia, and across Europe. It's estimated that Project Syndicate writers are reaching 30 million people with their columns, potentially, depending on how strong they are and how many people, how many media outlets pick them up. So it's a very strong sort of new outlet. Is one we did with Johan on climate and focus interventions there, which would then appear in Swedish newspapers as well. So they're top-tier media. So second-tier media, I think the Post, maybe that should be in the top-tier media as well. I mean, that's a big international outlet. In the Daily Telegraph, The Independent, the World Economic Forum, mainly English-speaking. When you talk about sort of top-tier international media, I mean, the reality is that we're talking about English-speaking largely. Then the third tier, so mainly national reach, Times of India, Dagens Nyheter here in Sweden, the German newspapers. It's a more national-based FT China. We did something with FT China last year with Global Carbon Project for the Global Carbon Budget, which had a lot of focus on China's emissions. So we specifically wanted to do something with Chinese media and worked with Denise Young-Atixu to develop some contacts with the editors there. And this was, a great. We thought it was a great success, making inroads there. And you could see some of the thought leadership in this, in that the Chinese state-owned news agencies very quickly started printing sort of responses, critiquing the content of this and content of the budget, and saying China was doing better than everyone thought, etc. So you could you got a feeling that it was in some way having some influence. So writing an op-ed. So the Economist Style Guide, clarity of writing follows clarity of thought. And the key message here is you need to have a single focused idea. I guess when we talk about global sustainability and Earth system science, you can bring in water issues and energy issues and food security issues and concepts like the Anthropocene and everything. But I mean, it really has to have the kind of clarity of a strong, single-focused idea to really work. The focus can be on complexity, but then that's the focus. You don't start diverging wildly into different areas. All the areas you do focus on, bring it round to the issue of complexity or interconnectivity, or whatever it might be. And this is, I guess, an issue Nina and I have worked with over the years with the research community to help really focus ideas and to strengthen them. Any thoughts, Nina?
As I for those who attended the previous webinar on commentaries, it's having a single strand kind of populating the commentary or an op-ed is always a good idea, and it really helps the readers to focus and stay on with what we have written to, because there's a lot out there, and readers tend to drift and they'll lose interest very quickly if they can't really relate to it quickly and sort of anticipate what's coming next.
So very basically, we're looking at sort of 800 words for this kind of length you're looking for, and the structure-wise is you have to start with a really strong hook. It gives your main argument, gives some sort of relevancy to the news agenda. Something recently has happened you're responding to, or is about to happen, that you're going to talk about, and a hook, a sort of linguistic hook as well, or a literary hook, something that or a metaphor, which we can talk about in a bit, to really hook in the reader and draw them in. And then pretty much, you make your main argument. You put in 3 supporting statements for that argument. 1 or 2 paragraphs each that articulate a specific issue. Each paragraph just focuses on a specific issue, and with a resolution, and moving on to second supporting statement, third. Then anticipate criticism. Who will disagree with your argument? Why why would they disagree with it, what are the weaknesses in it, and try to be open about that, and also say, well, why those critics might be wrong. So anticipating this is really important, and so protects you from deep criticism. And then solutions. Who needs to do what to whom, and when do they need to do it? You need these sort of call to arms, or these calls to action, and then finish. Conclusion, wrapping up, connecting to the beginning usually. So if you've got a nice hook in the beginning, just return to that hook at the end, and then the reader will feel in some way satisfied. It gives people a sort of a nice feeling that they've read something sort of complete and whole. And basically, op-eds are really following the rhetorics, this sort of structure and ideas and theory of rhetorics, from the ancient Greeks and elsewhere on speech writing, and making speeches. This is Roman Cicero, talking about what do you need for persuasive speech? 6 main points. Grab attention, vivid narration of facts, current areas of dispute, evidence supporting your argument, refutation, conclusion, and call to action. These great orators, very much follow this formula every time, and it's almost what makes them great. And just translating that onto the page to op-eds is fairly similar rules. And going back to this art of persuasion, the rhetorics, we've got logos, pathos, and ethos. Logos, obviously, the science community are fantastic on this, and op-eds really benefit from good, strong statistics, facts, research. You can see op-eds these days in the New York Times that that reference several research papers, and that gives the authority of these things, and that's great. And what the research community is less so good on is on the pathos and ethos, really connecting with the audience, personal anecdotes, empathy, respect, always respect your audience as well. And then the ethos, we need narrative and emotion, both passion, positive and negative, to really engage a reader. So on the structure, also these days with the online media, what people have worked out is that lists just really work well as a very simple structure. 5 tips to help improve your headline click rate. I mean, not particularly an op-ed, but many op-eds these days are running in that list form. 5 ways we need to do this or that to improve our lives or reduce carbon emissions, and that works really well. It works really well because the editors like it because it's easily shareable. People like sharing this content. It's easily scannable. If you've got a lot of shares, then you get a lot of viewers to your site, so that always helps. So 6 reasons. I'll show you an example of this, actually. 6 reasons why we need clean water for all, which we did as part of this agenda series. So I'll go through the opening paragraph for this. So ideally you want short, simple sentences, 25 words max for the opening sentence usually. You don't need to grab attention, it needs to be topical and have a strong opinion. So with this example I just showed, so when we worked with the authors on this originally, the idea was to do something on the water goal for the Sustainable Development Goals, and they sent some text as efforts ramp up to design metrics and indicators for water-related SDGs. It is prudent to be aware of and consider the invisible processes of water flows globally. It is important to distinguish between blue and green water flows. So I mean, this is great. It's factually correct, and it's interesting, but it's a bit impenetrable and not really, super engaging for an audience who may not have been thinking about water so much, or what these SDGs might be, or what green water or blue water might be. So we worked with them on this to create another opening paragraph that really links in with the news agenda. California is no stranger to droughts, but the Sierra Nevada snow that provides essential water to the state is at a 500-year low, according to research out this week. Population of almost 39 million is beginning to feel the pinch. So a couple of metaphors in there, strangers and pinches, and and we're connecting it directly with the news agenda. And then the next paragraph, we broadened it out a bit to talk about, but you know, if the wealthy people in California are having problems, that's nothing compared to what's happening in sub-Saharan Africa. So really contextualizing the water issue. And bringing in some of the global sustainability issues. You know, humans are actually changing the global water cycle, and then getting into these 6 points. So so essentially, you know, if my journalism tutor used to always say every sentence should make the reader read the next sentence, each word should make the reader read the next word. And I guess it's sort of creating these narratives. This should be in the top of your mind with every sentence. How do you get people to the next sentence and to the next one after that? And you don't want to lose people. Paul Krugman in the New York Times is pretty into this. This just in, saving the planet would be cheap. It might even be free, but will anyone believe the good news? So that's, you know, a great start to an op-ed, and it's you know, very positive. Unlike many op-eds, which you know, focus on negatives, this was a very positive one, but it's written in a very engaging style. But Nina, any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess as just going back to you know, you showed the paragraph that you received originally, and then you changed it. And in some ways, as researchers or scientists, we tend to write as we would write academic papers. It just comes naturally to us. And again, it takes a little bit of reading and writing to practice contextualization, setting the stage, having attention, and the sorts of things that we tend not to be comfortable with as academics are exactly the things we need to work on to write effective op-eds.
Yeah, and here we have you know, George Orwell's Guide to Writing. It's pretty much the opposite to academic writing in some ways. But, you know, no overused metaphors, short words rather than long words, always cut words, and spend huge amounts of time on editing, getting things down to, so they say, 800 words. Never use passive where you can use active. Research community is almost trained in using in the passive. Whereas, you know, if you want writing for impact, it's much better to use the active forms. And then scientific jargon, he makes a special point on getting rid of that. And of course, we can break all these rules if we're about to say something really terrible. You know, on scientific jargon, particularly in our world, I mean, I call it the Anthropocene bubble, where we live day in, day out, talking about you know, Earth system changes, regime shifts, resilience, social ecological systems, non-linearities, etc. So most of this, and even the Anthropocene itself, you know, most of it needs explanation in some shape or form, or avoiding these, using other terminology to explain. The research community doesn't always like the term tipping points. It's certainly more understandable to lay audience than non-linearities. So at the very least, you know, non-linearities needs to be explained, or to use an example to get the idea. Often when we talk about the Earth system, to the general public, this would just be Earth. And even resilience, it often needs to be unpacked a little bit, but certainly the Anthropocene. You know, when it comes to metaphors, you know, canary in a coal mine, you know, very in our field we use these all the time. They've become cliches. In fact, everything is the canary in the coal mine. We shouldn't use that anymore. In fact, in a level playing field, draw a line in the sand, missing a piece in the puzzle. So these are really overused metaphors in some global sustainability research. It'd be good to think up some sort of new, fresher ones than that. But metaphors are massively important. I mean, they can really last for generations and have a real impact on our thinking about issues. You know, the Iron Curtain, Cold War, etc. Really, these things, you know, set in stone. The geopolitics. These are how people relate to geopolitics over that period in terms of these very simple metaphors. You know, so a metaphor is a word or phrase applied to an object or action to which it is not literally applicable. So why the research community doesn't always feel comfortable with them, I suppose. But you know, in the Journal of Cognitive Science, that virtually all of our abstract conceptualization and reasoning is structured in some way by metaphor. And people remember metaphors really well. There's some research on their use in a so a paper finished with there's two. So there was some research done, and an audience was given a paper or an article, and some of the audience or some of the people being tested had a different ending to others. One ending was the German people blindly accepted Hitler's dangerous ideas. The others were given the ending, the sheep followed the leader over the cliff. And the outcome, the research showed that a few weeks later when tested, people who saw the second heading remembered this far more clearly and were able to recall it, sorry, not second heading, the second final sentence, the sheep followed the leader over the cliff. And then the first one. And they also remembered the preceding paragraphs and the preceding context better than those who were given this first ending. There's one reason why these metaphors are important. Metaphors in our space, got a safe operating space. Nature is sending invoices back to planetary machinery, ecological footprint. These are all powerful metaphors that you can see people now using more broadly. So they do have an impact in getting ideas out. And here's a few more. Nina, do you have any thoughts on the metaphors?
No, I think you covered it well there. Yeah.
And so so just a few more thoughts on the use of rhetorics in op-ed writing. Very practically, friends, Roman countrymen, rule of threes. 3 really works. 2 does not work so well. 4 does not work so well. 3 has a fantastic ring to it and is used constantly in op-eds and speeches. Stop, look, listen, faith, hope, and charity as memes that people really remember. Repetition is absolutely critical. For us, they packed up their worldly possessions. For us, they toiled in sweatshops. For us, they fought and died. This is the price of citizenship. This type of rhetoric works extremely well in op-eds and is used constantly by thought leaders. And then, we were fighting on the beaches. We were fighting on the landing grounds. And there's a classic Winston Churchill. I mean, he's a great studier of rhetorics and an effective speechwriter and writer generally. I mean, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature, incredibly. And so he really understood the value of this kind of thing. So, I mean, I'd encourage you to look at ideas in rhetorics on writing to help improve the writing of op-eds and include these sorts of techniques in here. And then so we can just leave it open now for questions and for thoughts for a start on pitching op-eds. But Ninad, how would you suggest going around pitching while I plug in my computer before it dies?
Yeah, I guess before I go to that, I might just add say a little bit about the fact that there is an increasingly diverse set of options now available for those of us who wish to write opinion pieces in news media. Owen, I'm not sure if I'm hearing something from your end, but okay, I'll continue. So, for example, with the New York Times, there's not just the standard op-eds or columns that accompany the editorials, but there's also series such as the Opinionator, and these are sort of longer pieces that deal with all kinds of topics, not just policy or politics, but also about philosophy, about religion, other things that form part of our life, art, and so compared to commentaries in nature or science, there's a very wide range of options available for publishing opinion. And again, my suggestion is to go ahead and look at some of these outlets and the range of possibilities they offer. In terms of pitching, it works slightly differently with different outlets. But unlike the journals like Nature and Science, most newspapers accept unsolicited submissions for op-eds. So the New York Times, there's just a link or an email address that you can mail your document to. However, they receive hundreds and thousands of submissions, and they are perhaps not as patient as some of the journals might be with what they like. So it's even more critical to get your original submission right and to catch them or to grab attention as much as possible. I'll stop there, Owen. You can add.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is it. The competition is absolutely fierce, and particularly, coming up to the big events like the Sustainable Development Goals, or more particularly COP21, where you know that a lot of people have a lot of opinion on that. So if you don't really have the sharpest, freshest perspective, and it's not in there in a timely way, then it's not going to make grade really at the top level. I also think that it takes like a bit of practice as well. It takes quite a few efforts with a single outlet, a single media, to pitch several times and not really get anywhere, and then try to understand why not. And there's an element of luck involved too, I think. And eventually, once you do get something in, then that helps the editors then feel so confident that you're somebody who does provide a perspective and can respond in a timely way to editing and to and the news side. That helps. So once you've got over that, first, easier to get a few more in. Obviously, don't bombard them with stuff. I mean, they're just not going to be taking comments from the same person week in, week out, unless you are Paul Krugman or someone. But it's a timely way for sure. Yeah. So I think we have a few questions in here. Let's see. Could you please speak more about the 6 essential components of persuasive speech and the art of persuasion? Okay, that just disappeared for a second, the chat. So I guess it's traditionally taught in Western schools that the rhetorics and these kinds of ideas on persuasion came from the ancient Greeks. I'm not entirely sure if that's. I'm sure they must have been sort of reinvented or invented elsewhere or brought in, etc. But certainly the Greeks have got some sort of fame for this, and the Romans, and some Aristotle and Plato, etc. A lot of discussion on these kinds of what works in terms of persuading people, and a lot of the rules that they developed they're called the figures of speech, these rhetorics, and there's hundreds of figures of speech. They talk about applying them in various situations and how effective they are, and which ones are more effective when. But you certainly see that a lot of the sort of great thought leaders and religious leaders and political leaders really know their rhetorics very, very well and use them to maximum effect. And I would say the good science communicators also are particularly good at developing new metaphors and using repetition and rules of 3, etc. in their communications. And it's something that takes a bit of practice to do. But it's worth that practice because it's extremely effective. I mean, any books on sort of persuasion, usually fall back on these sorts of ideas. Nina, have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess this sounds may come as repetition, but it really is. You need to read a very wide range of opinion pieces to get an idea of what sorts of tools of persuasion and rhetoric are used, and in what contexts they are used, because everything doesn't work everywhere. Certain contexts require certain types of language and persuasion. So the more you read existing op-eds, the more of an idea you will have in terms of what sort of your opinion needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then Benjamin Casper asks, a question on why, how would you put it into a communication strategy? I see this type of communication as very strategic communication, strategic science communication. It's about thought leadership. It's about opinion forming, shaping opinions, and it's about influence. And particularly if the sort of the media we're talking about, New York Times or Nature, etc. They have a very broad reach and do help shape opinion. Of course, shaping opinion takes many forms and doesn't happen over one op-ed or one article. It takes several years and using many different techniques. From workshops and research papers, from bilaterals, from events, talks, as well as op-eds. But all this sort of combines into what I would say is more strategic communications for influence on particular issues. And very practically, going up to COP21, for example, climate negotiations, some of the main media are looking for content, particularly op-eds. Huffington Post, I've been in touch with. You're going to run a whole series on COP21 and looking for thought leaders in the research community to offer fresh perspectives there. As of the Guardian, so these, I think they're very good opportunities in sort of any communication strategy or plan for rolling out a piece of new research or institute or organisation to include, writing op-eds with the directors of the institute or other thought leaders in the institute, and getting them placed in high-profile media is an important part of it. Also, I mean, the key thing though for the research community is it allows us to control well, rather than having that message, shaped or formed by others who may agree with us or may disagree with us, or relying purely on the journalists to write in a direct, unbiased article articulating the research. It gives the researcher an audience to speak directly to that audience without other media, without that filtering, which is I think very powerful. So I would say it's part of an essential part of communication strategy these days. And so, do newspapers reward your efforts if it is printed? No, that's part of the deal. I don't know if anyone does pay. There's honorariums in some cases. So Nature and Science have honorariums for their op-eds and commentaries, which are kind of fairly small, but it's good. But
I think the New York Times also has a similar honorarium, but it's quite a small amount. The real benefit really is in terms of the wide readership and potential influence that you get from it. So it really is worth it. I mean, it's a little bit of effort on 800 words or so, but if you do get it into some of these top outlets, it's absolutely worth it.
And it's worth talking about some of the other outlets now. So the Conversation is is like Project Syndicate, I guess, for the scientific community, where it provides a web platform for scientists to write about their work or other work or comment on something in the broader sort of political agenda or media agenda. It works as a kind of honest broker. I think it's absolutely excellent. I think it started in Australia a few years ago, specifically for Australian researchers, to encourage them to write more op-eds and feel comfortable about the process and feel they had control over the content and the editing. Basically, you pitch an idea to the Conversation. Their editors will look at that idea. They'll see if it would work, would have interest, a sort of fresh perspective, would be written in a lively form that would engage a broader audience. And if it fulfills all those criteria, then they'll commission, and then the editors will work very closely with the author to make it happen and to produce something that's really quite premium quality. They put a lot of effort into it. And I was in conversation elsewhere to Europe to, well, UK, I think the US as well. I think it'd be really nice to have an international conversation, or Europe-wide, or potentially. And so that's another avenue. Anybody in the academic community can sort of sign up to the conversation. And we should put a link in the chat box if someone has a time. I'll try to do it now. I don't have it up on my browser. But that's another opportunity. I think it's well worth going. And that might be like a sort of starting point for many people.
Yeah, I guess another example is the London School of Economics blog. I think they have a couple of blog series where they publish opinions on a variety of topics. And those of you who are from the social sciences or economics or other sorts of disciplines, the LSE's blog is a similar option. There is also an option of the Aeon magazine, which publishes longer pieces, much longer than traditional op-eds, and there's more flexibility in the types of pieces they publish. So it includes everything from religion to art to science, and it's grown in popularity. It's been well received by the readership. And that's another avenue to explore.
Yeah, and this is more of the long-form journalism or thought pieces that are becoming more popular. I guess there was a trend a few years ago with online writing to keep everything super sharp. Everything had to be just like you'd switch off if it wasn't a few hundred words, which is true. I mean, people have very, very short attention spans, but it's also true that people, that there's enough of an audience who really, really appreciate very in-depth coverage on new ideas. If it's written, if there's been a lot of editorial control to really improve the writing, if there's good style, be to read articles in thousands of words long. So Benjamin has another question. So kind of research politics to write op-eds. Very interesting. Research politics. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, influencing time span sending for printing. If you wanted to react to an actual issue, it needs to be quite direct. Yeah, the time span this is really, really tricky. Stuff has to happen very, very fast. So ideally with New York Times, I mean, they can operate on several weeks. You can submit something, say, in advance of COP21. If you submit it like a few weeks beforehand, that would be good, because it often takes them a while to schedule things in and to discuss and to work on your perspective and edit it and get it out. So that's not always possible with breaking news, and sort of often needs to happen very, very quickly. Weeks ago, but you could be forgotten very, very quickly. So it's really difficult. With Nature, with the worldview, I mean, what's great about the worldview column is that they can turn stuff around very, very quickly by academic research standards. Within a week or 2 weeks of pitching something with them, it can appear. So they like to be really, really responsive on that, which is nice, and they put a lot of effort into the editing there to make it really sharp. But generally, you're looking at days. You're lucky if you have a week or so to develop something. You really need to get stuff in really, really quickly. And yeah.
I mean, if you are, I guess it depends a bit on if you're reacting to something, in which case you need to do so quickly in a few days' time. And you see many of these on things like the Washington Post or the New York Times or Guardian. But then there's also pieces which you want to use to shape opinion for an event that's upcoming. And so I've seen pieces on, let's say, COP21 or the SDGs months or even a year or so in advance of the actual event. So it depends in some ways. The timing depends on on what you're trying to do, whether you're responding to something out there, either countering it or strongly supporting it, or if you're trying to shape opinion in advance of a major event.
So yeah, we had a conference a few years ago, water in the Anthropocene, about the global water cycle, and we wanted to do an op-ed in the New York Times for that. So you know, a week before the conference, we had something drafted which we thought was pretty good, and we submitted that. Charles Forrest Mardy was the author. And we didn't get anywhere. It was never heard anything, and you often never hear from them. They don't even send you like a rejection letter. It's just well, at the same time, they don't want you to go elsewhere until they've had time to consider it. So it's a difficult situation. Anyway, with this, we wanted it to come out in time for the conference. We thought that was a good news page. But they never got back to us. The conference came and went, and we thought that was it. But then 2 weeks later, the article appeared with some of the tense changed and some of the middle editing work that the author wasn't entirely happy with all of it. But it did appear. It was quite. I was totally surprised that the New York Times would still consider it news value 2 weeks after the event. But because it was about the global water cycle and the Anthropocene concept is still quite new and fresh to them, they decided to go with it. Yeah, I think we should wrap up. I think we've covered all the questions here. So this, as I said at the start, this is one of the Future Earth pop-up webinars, one in the series of them. I think is it the last one? Is there another one? Lizzie might know, but
the last one we've got in the calendar just now.
Ah, right, yeah.
Welcome to run more soon.
Yeah, and we've been really pleased with the feedback so far on all of them. We've had it's been a great audience, and we're hoping to run them again in the fall. Oh, sorry, in the spring, the Northern Hemisphere spring, and on similar lines. But we'll also be developing some policy type webinars too. But thank you all for joining. We'll keep in touch. If you have any queries. Any thoughts? If you need any support or help with any op-eds, feel free to contact us, and we can see what we can do. But good to speak to you. Thanks for organising, Lizzie, and thanks Nina for joining too.
Yeah, thank you, Owen and Lizzie, both of you.
Thank you. See you all next time.
See you.
Bye.